All right, good evening. Welcome everyone to our new Better Break event. Today we will talk about the funding of science. We are happy to do this together with our two guests, Karin van der Sande and Jan Linssen. My name is Frank, and together with Saad, I'll be moderating today's discussion. We are both part of the Better Break, which is a scientific discussion platform run by students of the University of Amsterdam. We organize monthly discussions on relevant scientific topics. Previously, these discussions were held at Science Park, but due to the current circumstances, we are now hosting online events together with Spui 25.
So the general theme of today's talk will be regarding the politics of scientific funding. Let this be just the money that's thrown at the university students themselves or the researchers that work at said universities. Now, we have a basic structure for this. It's a three-parter. The first part being just a general intro to research finance. This is a talk meant for folks who aren't particularly that originally interested in the topic. So, make it a bit friendly. The second part will be more about the general coronavirus and the state of the university, a bit of explanation of how the current status quo is, and also some of the new policies that have come up. The last part will be regarding today's politics. So, the solution to these problems and how we're going to deal with them. Now, generally speaking, we will try and maintain this more as a talk about specific political issues and political policy, but we will not be, let's say, calling out one particular party for another. You can decide that for yourself tomorrow. But all right, enough of the moderation team. Let us hear from the guests themselves, Jan Linssen and Karin van der Sande.
Jan, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, you're still on mute.
Mute.
I'm Jan Linssen. I'm a member of the board of the University of Amsterdam. The board consists of three people: the president of the board, Geert ten Dam, director magnificus, Karen Maaks, and the third person who's responsible for, let's say, the non-academic issues in the university, like finance, but also housing and ICT, etc. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jan. And Karin, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Karin van der Sande. I'm a grant advisor and I work only within the Better Faculty. I support people from several of the Faculty of Science institutes with applying for research funding.
All right, thank you, Karin. Well, let's start. So, first of all, Jan, I want to ask you, can you explain us how the university is funded? So, does most of the money come from the government, or are there other notable sources?
Yeah, most of the money is from the government, directly or indirectly. But so if you look at the budget for 2021, our turnover is about 760 million euros. So that's the total spend that we do in this year. And from this amount, about 68%, 520 million euros is directly from the Ministry of Education. So that's a big amount. And then of course you get another big amount. That's what you pay as students. It's about 100 million euros. So these are collegegeld, the fees that students pay, and some other income, but most of it is collegegeld. And of course, next to that, we get some revenue from institutions, companies outside the government. For instance, the European Union is a big spender on research. The Dutch Science Organization, NDO, is one that gives grants, and sometimes companies that we have partnerships with or who have specific questions, who want to fund parts of our research. So that's about 115 million euros, and then we get some other revenues, like, for instance, out of, well, when it's not Corona time, out of our sports facilities, out of CREA, or out of the catering companies. These things are not doing well at the moment. You can understand we're not making a lot of money there, but in the budget, it's still there for about 23 million euros. So that's the big picture.
And how much of the UVA budget goes to research? Is there a number, or is it not very clear?
Yes, about 40%, 43% from the what we get from the government goes to research, and 57%, is almost 60%, goes to education. And then, of course, we get the contract research revenues, about 86 million, and that goes, of course, completely into research. So if you add it up, about well, let's say 300 million of our budget goes into research, which is, well, let's say, well, 45%, I think, of our total revenue.
All right. So, sorry, did this include education as well, or was this?
No, this is only research. This is only research. Yeah.
And is this budget a bit different per faculty, or does every faculty get roughly the same?
No, there are. It's 40%. Sorry, I was over estimating it. No, there are big differences per faculty, and the way that government funds universities, there is also a difference between faculties. For instance, the Faculty of Science, FMVE, gets 1.5 times as much per student, for instance, as does the Faculty of the Humanities, or the Faculty of Law, or the Faculty of Economics. The biggest amount goes to the Faculty of Health. They get 3 times per student what, let's say, an average faculty, for instance, humanities, gets. But the other big earner is science, and that's, of course, because research and education in science faculty is more expensive. You need more hardware to do this. You need people to help students with experimentation and research, etc. So this is, of course, it's more expensive than when you do your education only with books or computer programs, etc. So this is one thing that makes a difference, and the other thing that makes a difference is that it is, oh, you could say easier, but I think it's not easy, because I think the sciences are more successful in getting external funding from companies, but also from the EU. Not only the sciences, also the faculty for behavioral science, FMG, is also very successful in this respect. So we got 2 faculties who do a lot of research and have a lot of money for research, and that are the science faculty and the behavioral science and societal sciences faculty. So, for instance, in total, about 60% of the budget of the Faculty of Science goes to research, and only 40% to education. And for societal studies and behavioral sciences, it's about 37%. So there is a big difference here. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And if I may ask for some elaboration, so this difference between the faculties, is it purely based on the needs of every faculty, like the medical researchers just needed more money to pay for all of those stethoscopes, etc.? Or is there also some kind of incentive for, let's say, let's say beta education to get more money because there's a little bit more of a motivation there on a societal level, like a political.
Of course, these things have been decided on historically. So this was something that this is something that the Ministry of Education decides, and they have done some studies years ago. And these studies indicate that you need more money to do your education research in a science factory than in a humanities factory. So that was the reason for this difference. Of course, things change. For instance, humanities factory faculty is using lots of data nowadays, and lots of software, and lots of computing power. So they need more money for these kinds of things as well. So there is some tension here. So historically, it's beta and health that have been the biggest receivers of the monies from the government. But there is, of course, always discussion whether this is still fair. Now, there was a report a few years ago, the Commission van Rijn. It was a former Dutch politician and civil servant who investigated this situation. And Van Rijn said that that there should be more money should go to sciences and especially technical studies, and this should go. This should be deducted from the money that goes to, for instance, humanities and economics and law. So this is something that is still very much debated. There is a new report. Maybe I can tell something about it later.
Yeah, I think we will.
Yeah. So, but this is a historical situation. I think there is some truth in it, because doing research and giving education in a science faculty is really more cost intensive than for instance, law. But of course, if it's really right, it's very difficult. It's very difficult because if you have little money, if you like law or humanities, of course you, as we say in the Netherlands, you put the tering naar de nering. If you earn less, you spend less because you don't have the money. So this is, of course, difficult to say where the truth lies. We're investigating that, but it's very difficult for our kind of work.
One of the things I always hear from my colleagues is that people in the humanities and the social sciences are complaining. Of course, we're Dutch, we always complain, but they have to do way more teaching, far too much teaching, more than within the Faculty of Science.
I think it's true, yeah.
But then money is linked to the amount of students that you get. Is there a big difference in student numbers over the different faculties?
Yes, of course, but that's not because if you have a small faculty, you have small amount of costs, so you need less staff. So this is I think what we call this factor, this 1.5 versus 1. This makes a big difference. I think that the people in humanities are right to complain. They have a heavier load on their shoulders in teaching and research and getting ahead than on average the Faculty of Sciences. But this is of course difficult thing to say in this environment. But I must be honest here. But we hope that we can improve this in the future. Not by deducting something here, but by adding something there. That would be the best thing to do.
Yeah, and my passion is in the Faculty of Sciences, and I really like a lot of the research that's going on there. Also within the Faculty of Sciences, there's quite some differences. One of the things in the last several years, the budget's been there's already been some reorganization, and costs for room that people use, for facilities. They are pushing heavily on the budget of several institutes. Is that also something that the university takes into account?
Well, the way we fund the faculties is that we have a model which is based on the way we get the money from the Ministry of Education. We distribute it among the faculties. We can add something and we can deduct something if we want, but that's the basis of our financing of the departments, the faculties, and then it's the faculties who decide how to distribute it within their realm, just between different programs, between research topics. So that's something that's really something that the dean of the faculty is in charge of.
So Jan, when you I don't know, when you or the UvA sends the money to the faculties, then the faculties are in charge. You don't longer have control.
Well, no. Well, there is, of course, there is a sort of the dean makes a budget, and we have to approve the budget. So in that way, we're still not in control, but I can still be responsible because I am responsible for every penny that Peter van Tienderen spends in a way. But I know he does well because he sends me his budget proposal and I review that. And of course, we monitor it during the year. So I know he spends it well. But of course, there are policy decisions that he can make, which, well, if he would do something very strange, I would ask him questions, of course. And maybe in some situation we would say, no, we don't agree. But most of the time, these are he stresses some things and de-stresses other things, and that's the room for maneuvering that a dean has, of course, with his staff. So this is something that also the student council and employees council has to agree with. This is all part of faculty and university democracy.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
So I do want like an additional explanation just to be sure, because we're talking a lot about how to best to distribute money across faculties, but there's a question for Karin then. What do researchers really have to do to get funding to begin with? And this is like an explanation for undergraduate or master students who are somewhat alien to the whole process.
It's a lot of work what they have to do. They have to helped by me and my colleagues, but they have to keep track of where funding opportunities are. So that's the EU or the NWO that Jan already mentioned, and then they have to come up with very, very good research ideas, discuss it with colleagues, fine-tune it, and develop it into a research proposal. And it depends a bit on the size of the project, of how much money that they're applying to, but it can be a lot of work. They have to write this application. They have to discuss with collaborators. They have to discuss with finance departments about their budget for the project. They have to often also discuss with the finance departments of the collaborators. To make sure that what a researcher wants from a collaborator also can be delivered. They have to submit a grant application, and then they have to keep their fingers crossed, because a lot of grant opportunities have quite a low success rate. If at the moment you have a success rate of something like 10-15% for a grant application, that's actually quite good. There's also grant applications where the success rate is like 3%.
And is there, let's say, a difference between just getting like normal grants, European grants, and perhaps even just like funding from the private industry, like ASML, etc.?
So the EU has now Horizon Europe, and that's the research and innovation program. within that, there's a part which is only targeting scientific excellence, and researchers can apply there for large personal grants. An established researcher with 15 years of experience, 15 years after getting a PhD degree, can apply for a grant of 2.5 million euros, and that's nice. Then you can have a significant expansion of a research group. And the advantage of those personal grants, NWO also has personal grants, but they're quite a bit smaller. The advantage is that you can do any research that you want if you get the money. There's lots of other grants where you have to have a collaboration with a company, and where the company has to also put some money in. Sometimes 50%, sometimes 30%, sometimes 10%. And it depends on the general situation of the economy, to what extent companies are willing to put money up. But then there's also sectors. The Institute for Informatics is being brilliant. They have lots and lots of collaborations with companies. It's on artificial intelligence, and it's on developing very smart algorithms that can do things that I can't even comprehend. The expertise in that field is still not freely available. The companies, by collaborating with the Institute for Informatics, get access to expertise, get access to young researchers that, once they have done their PhD, or sometimes even before, are available on the labor market. And they're willing to pay for it, because they pay just everything that it costs. There's not even grants applied. The university just gets full costs from those companies. But there's also areas where it's a lot more difficult to get companies to invest. And that's sometimes because the companies are just too small and don't have money.
All right. And could you explain, let's say, in fractions, for example, what fraction the private industry would play a part in when it comes to grants?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you elaborate a bit more?
Let's say you get 10 researchers in. How many of them are going to get private industry grants, and how many of them are going to get it from the national or European level?
If I get 10 researchers in, and they're from the artificial intelligence area from the Institute for Informatics, they all get money from companies.
Okay.
And if they don't, if they can't find the money from companies themselves, then we have also a business development office in the UvA with some business developers. Then I just grab one of the business developers, I think, and I tell them, here, there's a researcher from informatics, do something. And they can work with the researcher and help them find money. If I have people from microbiology, for instance, there's a couple of areas in microbiology that are really popular at the moment, and there's also a couple of areas where it's been, over the last couple of years, a lot more difficult to find money. So they will get money from NWO in smaller funding programs. If I look, let me think, in the Institute of Physics, I've had several researchers that were also really very good. One of them does work on quantum technology and making high precision clocks with electron clouds. And he had a FED flagship proposal a couple of years ago, which is European money in highly prestigious program. And he got a big personal grant. In the Institute for Informatics, there's also a couple of people who get these personal grants. So it's different from institute to institute. Depends on the popularity of the research, depends on where there's great developments, depends on where there's a huge demand from industry. So it's difficult to say.
I heard you said something about the NWO, which the scientists get their fundings from. But this is also government money, or right? If I'm correct.
It's government money. NWO was established, I don't know when, years ago, by the Dutch government. It's established by law, and it's an organization which has the task of spreading money over different universities, and it should be based on competition and excellence. So the best researchers with the best projects should be able to get the money.
All right, I see. So let us continue into the second part of the talk, which is more about the current state of the university. So first of all, with the current Corona COVID-19 situation, Karin, can you tell us if it's has gotten any tougher for scientists to get their funding now, or is it even easier maybe if they're working in biomedical sectors?
There's, I think, all over, every researcher who also did teaching or does teaching had a harder time to start with, because all the teaching had to be reorganized because of the Corona. So and there were several months that that nobody had time for grant applications, really, because they were busy doing other things. Of course, nobody. There will always be some small areas where people do have time. There were several grants for Corona research that came up, and a lot of them were in the medical area. So that meant that for my Institute for Logic, Language and Computing, there were no Corona possibilities, for instance. But within the Institute of Physics, and you might have seen him on television somewhere, Daniel Bon has been doing a lot of work on ventilation. He had some small possibilities for getting money for his research. Unfortunately, small possibilities, because in the way a lot of the calls were formulated, well, they did not target research like he was doing. But it didn't stop him, and he did the research anyway. And there's, well, within, there was within the microbiology area that people tried for the grants, but I think they were not medically directed enough. So I can't say how much of the budget of grant givers was redirected to other areas. With European money, it was a couple $100 million, but it was within the previous framework program that was ending anyway. And with NWO, well, NWO, in my opinion, does not have enough money anyway. So it won't have made success rates going down from around 10-15% to 2%. It won't.
All right, so it's good to see on this particular level how it is going with the researchers and, well, getting their grants, but maybe let's zoom out a little bit, because we've probably all seen news articles regarding the Dutch government trying to send a lot of money to education. Of course, most of it is just going to go to the basisscholen, middelbare etc. But of course, a part of it will also go to the university. 8.5 billion in total for the entire education system, but only a fraction of that gets to the university. Do you believe this is sufficient, Jan?
It is sufficient to repair the damage that COVID has done. I think it's a lot of money, and it can be used to repair backlogs and things that have happened over the last year, and so that I think it's a good initiative. but it's not sufficient for the long term, because student numbers have been rising for years now, and research and education funding hasn't grown enough. So this, you have to make a difference in this respect. So yes, given the way we were funded, we needed some extra money to repair the damage that that COVID has done, and I think that the government has done a good job to by giving us this money. I've been figuring out what it will mean for the UvA. This 8.5 billion will be 30 million this year and 14 million next year for the UvA. So we can use that, for instance, to repair problems that have risen in research that couldn't be finished because of COVID, or to repair backlogs that have been in education, students that have had educational problems. We can use the money to get them to perform better. So this is something that is really helping. Yes.
And the universities could freely spend this money, right?
Well, there are
restricted?
there are some restrictions, but we're still working on that. We're trying, of course, we always try to get the money as unrestricted as we can, because we think that we're the ones that are best apt to think where it's going. And of course, this will also mean that we will distribute it to the faculties, and they are trying to do their best job to put the money there where it is needed most. But there will be some restrictions. For instance, there is some money that has to go to to students with psychological problems, etc. This is, of course, we can't put that into research. We have to put that into counseling and psychological guidance, etc. And it's really needed. So we will use it for that as well. And the government will ask us how we spent this money, and we have to take care of these restrictions. But that's a good thing.
All right. And like we previously talked about the Van Rijn Commission, who said, I think in 2019, they made this report about the university and higher education in general, and what's wrong with it. So Jan, can you maybe elaborate on that, what they found and how the University of Amsterdam is dealing with that?
Yeah, so they said a few things, but the two of the most important things they advised was, first, more money should go to science and technology, and this money should be deducted from the other departments of the university, so medical, humanities, law, economics, social sciences. That's the first thing that they said. And the second thing that they said is we get two sorts of grants: block grants that don't change with the number of students that we have, and grants that are linked to the number of students. And they said we should get a little bit more in these block grants and a little bit less in these flexible grants that change with the number of students, because that would give universities a more solid base. It wouldn't fluctuate as much with rising and declining numbers of students. The last thing I think was really good, and it helps us in this very moment to get a more, let's say, even financing. The third thing, it was something that we as the UvA and lots of universities didn't agree with. and we told the minister that we wouldn't comply with this part of the report. So of course we get the money from the minister, and we can use it as we like within boundaries. And so we decided to ignore this Van Rijn report, and so this is something that I'm not having the best evening here at the science faculty, because the decision was not to make the redistribution from the other faculties to the science faculty. And of course, it's something, the first one I called when we made this decision was, of course, Peter van Tinderen, and I said to him, well, this is what we're going to decide. And of course, he wasn't happy, but he could understand what we were doing, because he saw that the problems in these other faculties were also huge. And we made some other arrangement. We are spending some extra money in the next years on 4 research teams, and we're making sure that in all these research teams, the sciences are profiting more. So this is something that, because we don't want the UvA sciences to lag behind the TU Delft or the TU Eindhoven, who are getting all this extra money because they don't have the other sciences. They just have technology and better, a little bit social science, but not so much. So this is the way we responded to this Van Rijn report.
All right, thank you.
So we are talking a lot about money here, but there's also a bit of, that I'm interested about regarding how researchers are trying to obtain funds in themselves. For Karin, when you get researchers now during the COVID pandemic, do you have a feeling that they are, changing the way that they handle research? Like, they generally speaking, like less risky research is, something that's more appealing to grant givers?
No, if you want to get a grant, it always has to be appealing for a grant giver. So that's not changing. There's some more attention for research that might have an influence on COVID, or there's more willingness for more people to look at grants related to it. But a lot of the researchers that I work with just don't have anything to do with it. So they cleaned up the mess that was left by COVID in having to adapt all their teaching and having to adapt research. With the lower numbers of people that could be in a building, the PhD students and postdocs that are in the labs just had to adapt to taking turns in working there. It just meant that there was more work, but no different approaches. And so as soon as people had everything sorted out, they started looking at grant opportunities again and writing. I think some people in perhaps artificial intelligence related to or complexity research related to the spread of a virus or similar processes will pay more attention to COVID. For others, it will not be interesting ever. Not for logic, language, not for catalysis, not for the people in the Astronomy Institute.
Mm-hmm. All right. We have a question from the audience, and I believe that's a question for Jan. So it's about the studiefinanciering.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. So when the Dutch government stopped the student financing, there would be more money for the quality of education. Is this known where this money is used for exactly? And do you think, Jan, that the stopping of this student financing did well for the education, for the quality of the education?
Okay. This is of course a very good question, and the first part of the question is easy to answer because the money that was given to us by the government because of the fact that they saved money because of the stopping of this student fees and changing to loans is extra, and this helps us to be.
I'm afraid that Jan's connection is poor.
Damn. What I know from the spending of that money is that some of it was invested in having some more people to do teaching. Since research and teaching is interconnected at UvA, it also meant that there was here and there a bit more capacity for research. Smaller groups for some of the work colleges, not college, the work sessions, not the lectures, but the working groups.
Seminars.
Yeah, Jan is back. Jan, back to you.
So every part of the UvA had to make a plan how they were going to spend this quality money. That's what it's called, kwaliteitsgelden. And they are, for instance, spent into small-scale education, just more tutoring-like education. They're spent sometimes in facilities that are being approved. So you can go to the budget of the FNVE, for instance, and you can see in the budget for 21 where these monies are being spent. And this is something that is put into a plan a few years ago, and this plan had to be agreed to by the student council. So the student council was very important in this discussion. This is something that the minister decided. So every university had to make a plan, and this plan had to be very specific, and this specific plan had to be agreed upon in the student council. So this is where you can really see where we're putting this money into which things, and we were not completely free to spend it. We had to spend it in accordance with what the minister thought that was quality enhancing, but these were okay things. So, and it was we could there was a rather broad a scala of subjects that we could put the money in. So this is something that is really happening, and I think everyone can see that this money is being spent. The second part of the question is, of course, whether this was a good deal for students. Of course, I think if you're really fair, you could say that some of the things that people said that would happen if we would change from grants to loans is that that universities would be less accessible, for instance, for children with parents that weren't so wealthy. Research hasn't shown us that this happened. So the Dutch system is still accessible. On the other hand, we see at the moment, of course, and this is something that lots of your fellow students are complaining about and well, making a lot of fuss about, and rightly so, is that it is very difficult at this moment to study, and of course you can get your loans, but when you end your studies, you have an enormous debt already, and of course anyone can say, well, you will make a lot of money later on and you will be able to pay it back, but of course this is not sure. This is something that is unsure, and of course getting a house at this moment, buying a house is really difficult, much more difficult than when I was younger. Not that in the 80s it wasn't nice at all, or so there were a lot of things were not very well in the 80s because it was very difficult to get a job then. But houses were a lot cheaper than they are now, and the student grants were much better. So I got my student grants for 5 or 6 years, and I could, well, with a little bit of work and a small loan, I could live by that really comfortably. And so this is something that you can decide upon tomorrow. Of course, if you go to the ballot, there are parties, political parties, who want to change the system back to grants again, and there are parties who say, well, this is okay, let's keep the loan system. So that's something that you can decide upon. And there are drawbacks. Of course, the thing that we shouldn't have is that for the university it would be really a bad thing if the grants are reintroduced and the money for that is being taken away from the budget of the university, because then we're back to where we started.
If we talk about the quality of the education, so recently, you have the WO in actiegroep, and they already, like, in line with Van Rijn's commission, they said that there are some problems with the higher education. And very recently, at the start of this year, this was put into numbers. So there was like 1 billion euros short for good higher education.
Universities, especially, not even not universities of applied sciences, but research universities like the UvA. Yeah.
Just the universities, 1 billion already. So, so is that, if that money is gonna, I don't know, the different political parties probably have different opinions, but are there signals that money is gonna be there, and would that solve all the problems, you think? Both of you, actually. Maybe Karin, do you think all this extra money would solve the problems?
To some extent, there will always be problems within university, and that's the kind of problems that are part of my job, because there's young researchers that want to apply for grants and that want to enter a research career, and the university simply can't be large enough to accommodate everybody who wants a research career. I think that aspect is something that I will have to live with. It's sometimes it's sad to see young and enthusiastic people and talented people not manage to stay in academia. But then there's research positions in companies as well, and there's challenging positions that people from the Faculty of Science, because they learn how to think logically and they learn how to approach difficult things. People can work in lots of different jobs. Now, that there's a lot of research funding going to medical issues. It's really difficult to say that's a problem and we should not do that. Jan, if you want to, if I'm saying something stupid, do interrupt. But with medical, it's much easier to give more and more and more money to medical research, because there will always be people who have family who's suffering, friends who are suffering, and who want a solution and who want research in that area. I think within the Faculty of Science, there's lots of research on topics which are hot and very popular, but there's also research on topics which are important, but which at the moment are not hot. And we need that research to be able to do all the teaching. Now, the funding there is not,
science.
and the funding system is not built in a way that kind of research will be able to get grants, and that is a problem that would be nice if it could get solved.
So at the WO, they don't have special budgets for fundamental research and applied research. So it's all one budget.
No, there's at NWO there's last year, the year before that, the organization that gives money to universities for applied science was sort of joined with NWO. Universities of applied sciences have their own grants that only they can apply for. But in order to be able to get a grant, most grants want something which is sensational and which is new and which is promising big breakthroughs and which is promising big results and which is promising collaborations with companies and which is promising that there's going to be a possibility of results for the companies, that the companies can grow. And that's just research areas that can't offer that. And we still need those research areas for perhaps in the future something happens. And we need people to be able to work in those areas in the future. So we need to educate people also there.
So let me see. So, and talking about private industry, are there a lot of projects funded by private industry rather than the NWO, rather than the government? And do you think, is there any trend, maybe now due to Corona or COVID, that are more people, would you see, let's say, research at the university that's fundamental often or applied, but with companies, they might have very different goals. Is there any problem with the interest in that sense?
I see a trend not because of COVID, but a longer trend, maybe a trend because of our government, of the VVD party being in the lead in our government for like 10, 12 years. There's much more research which requires investment from companies that's increasing. And NWO had to spend part of the budget on research which involves companies. And like 15, 20 years ago, that was, at 20 years ago, I think that was hardly existing. And it's not a wrong thing that we do research which targets companies, which targets economy. Every euro that you spend on research will give you 3, 4, 5, or even more euros in output in the environment, in companies that get established, or in people that get work. And from that point of view, Amsterdam has artificial intelligence, and Amsterdam has companies that in creative industry which will use that sort of things. So the University of Amsterdam also is helping the city. But that's not a full answer to your question. I think it's not a bad thing to have research that works with companies, but I think we should keep a balance in purely fundamental research that just can investigate whatever we want.
If I could say something about that, I totally agree. Karen is I think you're doing a great job explaining this policy. There is, of course, there are all kinds of reasons to work with companies in research, because there are clever people there as well that can help you get ahead, because they can provide money, and because they can also provide sort of more legitimacy of the university. So people in the country want to see what research does for society. And not all research has direct spin-off in economy or in society or in medical. But of course, if you have, you can tell it to them and you can show them what research does. And that makes universities more stable in the minds of the voters and all the people in the country who have to pay tax money to keep us going. So this is something I think it's good. On the other hand, the system that we have at the moment with NWO and the grants from Europe and the matching, etc., leads to a very difficult situation for research that is really not fundamental and curiosity driven. So and of course we need this kind of research because of the fact that that's the reason why we are a university. Not only because maybe in the future this will have some spin-off, etc. Some of the research, if we do research into black holes, etc., maybe no one ever has any economical or societal profit of it. But it is not. We want to know because it's what we are as humans. We are curious. We want to know how our world works, and this is of course the main reason why we are a university. It's not for all these other things which are very important, solving problems, etc., and we have to do that. But of course the main reason why we are a university is that we want to know as human beings why things are what they are, and this is of course in science but also in humanities our base. So I really hope that we get this extra money, this billion for all the universities together. That's a lot of money for the UvA as well, maybe 100 million per year on the longer term. So that would really help us to get this curiosity-driven research going. And the things that we're thinking about is giving every researcher, every established researcher, what they call rolling grants, so they get a pocket of money that they can use so they don't have, of course they can still do applications at NWO and at the EU, it's all right, but you can also have your own money to investigate the things that you think are important. I think that's what the universities are for. So we should really we need now at this moment it's really difficult to do these kinds of research, and especially for younger research it's very difficult. So I hope we're getting this money in the next government, and yes, of course, well, it depends on our votes. so.
Yeah, do you guys tomorrow when you vote yourself, do you take into account the policy of education and science funding, or is that not the most important topic for you?
Well, I voted yesterday already because yes, I saw that nobody was at the voting station, so it was only for people with health problems. They said, but you could go. So I voted yesterday, and of course, you take other things into account. You take into account the environment. You take into account international politics. You take into account economics. So this is something that everyone should do, because there is more in the world than education. So I think as a student, of course, this is important part of your life, but you should look at the broader picture as well. So I think that would be the best thing to do. But then, of course, you can still give that a big accent in your consideration.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Karin?
I'm a lazy voter, I have to admit. I vote. And then I go on the internet and I fill out a couple of the programs where they will tell you which program is interesting. And I always get really annoyed because it's 50% this party, 52% that party, 48%. So then I just then I think, okay, what appeals to me? And I just look up 3 or 4 of the election programs and I search for a couple of words. And research and education and the environment and Europe, that those are very important for me. So I look up those and then I think, okay, I fit best with that party and that's it. So I'm going to be voting tomorrow. Hopefully also just having to walk into an empty voting station, but I'll just see.
And before we roll on to finishing this and going for the last few questions, this is a question for Karin. This is a bit of a PSA. What would you recommend future researchers, let's say some students here who are in their masters, to learn more about science funding and how that money flows in general? Because I'm currently a bachelor student and I don't really know where to begin if I want to know how money flows in university.
So you're a bachelor student. Do you want an academic career?
In case I want an academic career, specifically that, yes.
Yeah. It's as a bachelor student, as a master student, you don't come across these sort of things. And the best advice that I can give you actually is always to keep your eyes open for every opportunity. And go to a couple of those career events. But then also, as a bachelor student, normally you won't know what NWO is. You don't know that the Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research exists. And I don't think you should beat yourself up if you don't. Follow your passion. When I was about your age, or even a bit younger, I thought, well, there's all this unemployment, and I'm never ever going to find a job. I am going to choose a study which I know will keep me busy and happy and entertained for the rest of my life, and I just did. And I went to study biology, which was at that time a study where the unemployment rates were horribly high. And well, I've been working now at the University of Amsterdam for almost 18 years. I've not been a day without a job in my life. Keep your eyes open and follow your passion. And,
all right.
And later on, if you become a PhD student, then follow what happens and then start looking into how the research funding is organized and how things are organized within universities.
All right, thank you for your advice. I see that we don't have any open questions from the audience. So I want to thank you, both of you, Karin and Jan, for being here with us today. I want to introduce the next edition. Our next edition will be on the science of beauty. It will be on the 21st of April, also together with Spui on Zoom. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank Spui for hosting us. And well, maybe with all this information that you got today, you can base your vote tomorrow on what you've heard. And so please go vote tomorrow. And then I want to say goodbye and thanks again for watching.
Goodbye.